Greetings, sorcerers. Welcome back to the Contested Realm. We've got a treat today with the finals from the Crossroads event at SCG CON Houston. Let's dive in. All right, sorcerers, welcome to the finals from SCG CON Houston from the Crossroads event. It's fantastic to be here. My name's Jesse Millman Marshall, and we've got here in the finals Nate on the right and James on the left. Nate is playing Druid, and James is playing Avatar of Air, which is fantastic to see here in the finals of a Crossroads event. So Nate on the bottom of the screen here now with a Grimgassam, a Desert, Ruins, a Lighthouse, an Infernal Legion, and a Sir Agravain. James at the top of the screen on Avatar of Air looks to be mulliganing one side here at least. One spell, I should say, at least. And from Nate's perspective, carefully considering mulliganing that Infernal Legion. But what Nate is going to be thinking about here is all throughout this tournament, and particularly throughout the top 8 matches to this point, James has been confounding his opponents with small minions like Sling Pixies, which has, in some of the top 8 matches in fact, sat on top of Pudge Butchers and prevented those Pudge hooks from having any effect whatsoever, because the Pudge can't actually harm the Slim Pixies. They're immune to its damage. Of course, Nate has a few ways to deal with those kind of annoying small units. If they're 1 power, Nate's got Deserts. But if they are 2 power, or even 3 power, things like Infernal Legion can deal with them very effectively. Nate here using the second player Seer rule to take a look at the top card of the spellbook and leaving that on top with a little pat.
Go for it.
And here comes James with a Gothic Tower into a Tooth Fairies.
Are we good?
So that is not only a 2-power minion, but it's a 2-power minion here that James has been using alongside the Sling Pixies to confound his opponent's attempts to defend. Tooth Fairies, of course, at the beginning of the Avatar of Air's turn, is going to tap a nearby enemy minion. And what that means is that if James can get enough tempo here, being on the play, Nate actually choosing to play second here, or to draw first, if James can use that tempo of being on the play with this Tooth Fairies that he's played on turn 1 to actually get in some early damage to the point where Nate is actually playing units to try and defend his territory, the Tooth Fairies is going to be critical to preventing that from happening and to keeping up James's tempo and hopefully getting, from his perspective, Nate all the way to death's door.
Okay.
So the Highland Falconer here played on James's home site, getting the Pallery Bats, and then the Avatar of Air pushing the Highland Falconer forward onto the Updraft Ridge. And that Updraft Ridge actually a perfect spot for the 2 airborne minions behind it. The Desert taking out the Highland Falconer, which from James's perspective is one of the issues in this matchup. Whenever you're facing into a Druid with, particularly obviously one with fire as one of the main elements, if not the main element, those Deserts are annoying for the 1-power minions like Sling Pixies and like Highland Falconer.
Yeah, for sure.
Ring of Morrigan coming down.
Go over here and take it from me, please.
And that was the card, in fact, that Nate saw on the second player Seer and left on top of the spellbook, as you might expect with a card as powerful as Ring of Morrigan. So that Updraft Ridge here is going to allow James to actually attack with both the Pallery Bats and the Tooth Fairies using the additional movement from the Updraft Ridge. But it looks like perhaps not doing that with a Tooth, just moving the Tooth Fairies forward onto the Updraft Ridge. So it could be that James was not wanting to clump both of the 2-power airborne minions onto the same location. But since that Sinkhole was coming, which has been used to devastating effect by James to slow down his opponent's recovery in earlier rounds, since that Sinkhole was coming, it does beg the question of whether it would have been worth getting the extra 2 damage in there with the Tooth Fairies by utilizing the Updraft Ridge to allow it to attack before James destroyed the site with the Sinkhole. So Nate there not having any plays by way of spells, just putting that Joyous Guard down onto the back row and giving James here quite a bit of tempo. So those Pallery Bats are going to be able to attack either onto the Joyous Guard or onto Nate's home site, and the Tooth Fairies also off the Updraft Ridge will be able to attack this turn. So James actually, instead of attacking the site, kills Tawny, which is interesting. I guess there, rather than attacking Nate's life total, he's trying to protect his 2-power airborne minions from Tawny killing them, because in order to kill, for instance, Palabri Bats here, all Nate would need to do is play one spell, trigger the ring, deal 1 damage to the Palabri Bats, and then attack it with the Tawny. And then Nate could even resummon Tawny by playing a site if Nate had a 2-power spell to cast. But by killing Tawny there, James is denying that option, and it's requiring Nate to have 2 spells in order to be able to use the ring to take down the 2-power airborne minions. It does, though, mean, because Tawny couldn't defend, James did have the option of attacking the site and leaving Tawny there, but dealing 2 more damage and reducing Nate's life further. Highland Falconer also came down last turn, Tawny being resummoned onto the Oasis, and now a Quarrelsome Kobold's coming down, and at the end of turn... Oh, not passing yet.
But I will, end of turn, kill the 2 fairies.
Deciding to kill the 2 fairies with the Quarrelsome Kobolds. And pinging
we're gonna do
with the ring to gain 1 life back. And then actually deciding to kill the Palabri Bats instead, it looks like. Yes, there go the Palabri Bats.
And pass to you.
So that's interesting in a way, because the Tooth Fairies here are going to actually do their thing, and they're going to tap down that Quarrelsome Kobolds, which means it's not going to be able to defend. But I guess from Nate's perspective, Nate's probably pretty happy to trade. The Kobolds has already taken out the Bats. If it also takes out one of the other 2-power flyers because James attacks into it, then it's kind of done its job. And if the 2-power airborne minions don't kill the Quarrelsome Kobolds here, then the Kobolds is still going to strike them at the end of the next turn anyway. So it's still going to eat its prey. So James, the Kobolds actually presenting James a bit of a pickle here, because what James's deck is really wanting to do is use Tooth Fairies to take defenders out of the way, be airborne so the unit that the opponent has played can't actually attack them back. But Quarrelsome Kobolds getting around that airborne benefit by actually having its ability to strike regardless. So James here thinking very carefully that the Palabri Bats does have +1 movement, so it is going to be able to attack, for instance, across onto the Oasis, where Tawny is, or to take out Tawny again if James wishes. The Highland Falconer can attack in on the Druid's site by using the Avatar of Air to push it forward here. The other option was to attack in with the Avatar of Air, but probably not wanting to get closer to those Quarrelsome Kobolds or to any future Kobolds that could be played. And it's going to be interesting here to see what James has to follow up, because if James doesn't have a minion this turn, then Nate has, with the Tooth Fairies there trading with the Kobolds and with Tawny soaking up another hit from the Palabri Bats after soaking one up last turn, James isn't making the dent in Nate's life total that he would like, especially given that the ring is giving this incidental healing. So James now playing the Watchtower forward, threatening Nate's home site, and not having a play, it looks like, with Nate untapping here. So I can see 2 Gaia Hippogriffs, and it'd be interesting to see what the other spells are there in James's hand. But not having a tower, having that Watchtower, so missing out on that acceleration to get to 4. And if that had been a tower, if that Watchtower had been a Dark Tower or a Lone Tower, James would have got the mana acceleration that would have allowed him to play the Gaia Hippogriffs and actually take out the Quarrelsome Kobolds without losing the Hippogriffs. That then would have kept the Tooth Fairies alive, allowed them to attack, and that would have been a massive swing. So unfortunate for James there, missing that tower, missing that acceleration, and having an off turn. So we'll see if Nate can capitalize. Tawny comes back. There's a Sir Agravain, and the Highland Falconer is going to be killed by the Ring of Morrigan. The Palabri Bats survive, but Sir Agravain is really threatening the Bats.
And pass to you.
So here we see the players. We've got Nate on the right and James on the left. James has got those 2 Gaia Hippogriffs in hand, so we're going to assume there's going to be a site draw here. Here we go. So James draws a site, and it would be cruel if this is one of the towers that he was looking for on that previous turn. And it's actually a Face City. That's interesting. So Fey City, something that, for instance, allows the Tooth Fairies to get that extra point of damage in from across the board.
Always.
Rolling Boulder here taking out Sir Agravain and Tawny, allowing the Palary Bats to get a little bit more use out of themselves this turn. And the Avatar of Air, of course, a really powerful synergy with Rolling Boulder because it does allow units to be moved whilst untapped. And the Avatar of Air here potentially could bounce itself onto the Fey City, and then the next turn bounce itself diagonally onto the Lighthouse and threaten to use that Rolling Boulder to push it across the back row. So James is taking that line of play, moving the Avatar of Air diagonally onto the Fey City, threatening next turn to move an untapped Avatar of Air onto that Lighthouse and then roll the Boulder across the back row. Which does mean now, with all of Nate's sights being on the back row, that Nate really has to, if he doesn't have any sights in hand, draw a sight here, play it forward, or else whatever he plays onto that back row is going to be susceptible to being hit by that Boulder. One of the slight complications there for James is that the Palibri Bats is going to have to get out of the way of the Boulder, if that's what he elects to do, lest it get hit by the Boulder, and getting out of the way by moving on to the second row, from Nate's perspective, means that he's not going to be attacking Nate. So that Funeral Pyre, if Nate had played that on the other side, adjacent to the Boulder, then it would have given a space for the Bats to attack. So of course, Nate here in the finals of the Crossroads, he's not missing a trick, and he plays that Funeral Pyre off to the right-hand side, safe from the Palibri Bats' attack next turn. And that also gives Nate that safe haven that he needs to play a minion forward, safe from the Boulder.
Crazy. We'll Lava Flow here. We'll ping.
And instead,
the Lava Flow goes off.
here comes a Lava Flow. So an expensive spell to spend killing a Palibri Bats. And Palibri Bats that wasn't likely to have too much of an impact next turn anyway. And if you're in James's seat here, you'd be looking at this saying, okay, well, now I get to bounce my Avatar of Air onto your Lighthouse, roll the Boulder across, play my Gaia Hippogriffs, and then attack onto the site where the Boulder's going to end up. So then the Hippogriffs are threatening to push the Boulder back the next turn. So that's not a bad situation at all. So here James goes, pushes the Boulder across the back row,
14. Yep.
takes Nate down to 14. Unfortunately, that incidental healing from the ring has been pushing Nate's life total back up from where James would have liked it to have been at this stage in the game. And those attacks from the Bats on Tawny early, unfortunately leaving leaving Nate's life total also a little bit undamaged. And here again, the Gaia Hippogriffs effectively giving Tawny defend, where Tawny has this can't defend drawback. By aggressively killing the Tawny, the Gaia Hippogriffs really allowing Tawny to defend their attack in a de facto kind of way. You can understand why, given so many Druid decks rely so heavily on Tor's Hammer Trinket on Tawny as a way to get value, James might be avoiding giving Nate that option. But the Infernal Legion, unfortunately, is going to deal very effectively at the end of the turn here with James's Hippogriffs. And so James now doesn't get the opportunity that he might have liked to push that Boulder with the Hippogriffs back across. Of course, James did also attack onto the Funeral Pyre, which meant that, because Tawny was there, which meant that he couldn't have pushed the Boulder anyway. And here again, Hippogriff selecting to take out Tawny. They are on the opposite side to the Legion, so they are a little bit safer. But they're not really making a huge dent in Nate's life total. And oh my goodness, the second Infernal Legion comes down, which is going to deal basically for free with that Gaia Hippogriffs and leave a 6 power minion on the battlefield, which, oh boy.
And pass the turn, you'll take 3 more and kill the 11 guy.
Oh. So his Hippogriffs really have just taken out 2 Tawnies and then both been eaten by Infernal Legions, which is not the value that James would have been wanting, and this is not the board state that James would have been wanting, with 2 enormous 6 power minions staring him down, which is not something that Air is particularly well equipped to deal with. So James is going to be hoping here for a Chaos Twister or some other hard removal. A Chaos Twister, of course, has the remote, you might say, possibility of 2-for-1ing those Infernal Legions by landing one on top of the other, probably picking the one up from underneath the Avatar of Air and trying to land it on the other Infernal Legion in front of Nate. But
did he get the bottomless bit? You can tell. You can show me if you don't have to tell yes or no, but that's what I was worried about.
So Nate here asking, do you have the bottomless pit? Because that is, aside from Chaos Twister, one of the other ways that the Avatar of Air can deal with these large minions, especially with the Infernal Legion being cast directly underneath the Avatar of Air.
It would have been pretty sweet.
Nate actually really opened the door there for James to punish him with that by giving him the opportunity to play the Avatar of Air, the bottomless pit on top of that rubble, for example, and then bounce the Infernal Legion into the pit. But it looks like from James's body language, he probably didn't hit the bottomless pit, which Nate was worried about. And if he doesn't have a Chaos Twister, or he doesn't have some other sort of removal to take care of that Infernal Legion that's underneath the Avatar of Air, then he's going to be taking 6, 12, 15, 18 damage next door, which is going to put him to Death's Door. 6 from each of the legions attacking, and then 3 from each of their end of turn abilities. So here, what James achieves by bouncing that Infernal Legion backwards is that the Legion won't be able to attack the Avatar directly this turn. He could conceivably have moved his Avatar backwards instead onto the rubble, which may have been better in some ways, well, particularly now that the Infernal Legion's actually just going to be able to attack straight up and hit the Avatar of Air here. Or he could have bounced the Infernal Legion onto the Oasis diagonally if he was planning to bounce the Legion. Sling Pixies here, unlikely to achieve too much other than being able to defend the Infernal Legion's attack, which is helpful. But if there is and there's no spot here for Nate to play a Desert to take out the Pixies, which is helpful.
Take a step up. Yeah.
But he does have that Ring of Morrigan that is going to deal very effectively with a 1-power minion. And he's got plenty of mana to play probably whatever's in his hand. And any spell here equals Death's Door, because a ping from that Ring of Morrigan will take care of the Pixies, which removes James's Defender.
Yeah, I'm going to cast something.
Yeah, play it through.
Just want to not lose because this is kind of a double edge, no pun intended.
So James here in a pickle, and Nate thinking, I think, about playing that Grim Gassam, since he referred to a double edge pun.
Grim Gassam back here.
And so there's the Grim Gassam. He's not casting it forward because really he doesn't need to. He doesn't need the extra damage. James is going to Death's Door here. So having it anywhere else might have actually exposed Nate to some threat of a surprise Death's Door. Not exactly sure how, but given he didn't actually need it other than for the ping from the Ring of Morrigan, makes sense to really play it back there. So James here staring down Death's Door, staring down 2 Infernal Legions adjacent to him. So he can bounce himself back diagonally onto the rubble.
That size is throwing me off. I'm thinking I had more room over here.
Yeah, you whisk yourself.
I just throw a class
And
city
so
run
bounced
away.
himself.
But there's not that much.
Yeah, if he bounces himself back onto the rubble,
A little bit of room.
then he can move across onto the updraft ridge, and the Infernal Legion will then be able to move across, and all Nate needs to have is 1 spell from the Ring of Morrigan. So that's not really a way out. So it's kind of hard here to see any way for Nate to avoid killing James, or rather any way for James to avoid this death blow. So he draws a sight, effectively looking for that bottomless pit, I think, which might allow him to deal with 1 of the legions. But 2 legions threatening damage to adjacent squares, a Ring of Morrigan threatening damage to nearby squares. It really is a hopeless cause, and James extends the hand, and Nate becomes a 2-time Crossroads champion in 2025. That is out of 6 events that we have run, or are running in 2025. We've run 4, and Nate has won 2 of them. That is an extraordinary effort from a player, so huge congratulations to Nate. Massive congratulations to James for piloting a very creative Avatar of Air list all the way to the final, taking out some very formidable foes, both in the top cut, but also in the Swiss rounds. playing some extremely tight sorcery along the way. I was lucky enough to watch quite a few of James's games, and he meticulously used the tools available to him to get himself all the way to the final. And Nate, of course, a meticulous player, a Crossroads champion in 2025 already, and now a 2-time Crossroads champion. So well done to our 2 players. Well done to everybody who participated in the Crossroads at Houston at SCG CON, at our first SCG CON for the Sorcery team. It was a wonderful event. We're so happy to see all of you there, and we can't wait to see you next weekend in Baltimore.